mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and we are going to have a very special episode of Into the Fringe tonight with Walter Bosley, and I will let Walter do his intro, as it is rather lengthy but important, and I will be most happy to bring him on now. Welcome back to Into the Fringe, my friend, Walter Bosley.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going
good to be here.
Really well. And I think the first order of business should be to pour our beverages to our tiki.
I think so.
We're going to have a tiki off here. This is mine. This is the Alien Queen.
Oh, that's cool.
My question is Alien Queen versus Gorn.
Gorn, yeah, there we go.
Who wins?
I have a feeling the Alien Queen would.
I do too. Let's go ahead. Let's pour. So tonight I'm having a wonderful raspberry flavored drink.
I'm having seltzer water. And I'm there.
All right.
Okay.
L'chaim.
We're ready.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right.
Yeah, one of the things I do Sundays, the middle of the day, right before going on my live stream, is I run up to my local grocery store and pick the beverage of the day. So those are usually acquired like just an hour before I go on, because I never know exactly what I want until that day.
Until you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next time we'll have to coordinate beverages.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to go ahead and put this comment in to please subscribe to the Walter Bosley channel. That way you'll get to hang out with Walter once a week instead of just once a month here on Into the Fringe. And the shows that he does are mind-blowing in terms of subject matter and his research. So I encourage everyone to please subscribe. And while you're at it, please subscribe here to this channel. Ring the notification bell. Do all that good stuff. I've been stuck at 633 subscribers for, it seems like forever. So let's say hello to some folks in the chat. What do you say, Walter?
Sure.
Ed Dauphine is here. Good evening.
Hello, Ed.
Mala Grimm, hail.
Hello.
Ari Bevel, hail and greetings. Ivan Ivanovich, good evening. Antiderivative Jill is here. Hello.
Hello.
Heather Franklin is here. Hi.
Hey, Heather.
And Lord Ludicrous Plaid is here. Cheers.
There he is.
So we got all the good folks, and hopefully we'll have some more, because I am just now sending out the tweet that we are live. So we are going to have a lot of fun tonight. First of all, I'd like you to put on your counterintelligence hat on for just a minute. Briefly, what do you think about Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine, and what happens if China decides to take the opportunity to go after Taiwan as the situation escalates?
Well, I'm probably not in the camp people would think that I would be in with my background. Just for those who don't know, I spent a pretty good portion, well, 2/3 of my career working against either the Soviet Union or Russia, after the fall of the wall. And I mean, that was always my primary target that I worked against, my primary adversary. However, over the last 30 some years since the fall of the wall, for all their faults, and they do have them, Russia is not the Soviet Union anymore. And
although it's run by a KGB strongman.
A KGB strongman who, last I checked, the day the wall fell, he resigned and walked away from that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Vladimir Putin is not exactly the godless Soviet
that we make him out to be.
Yeah, right. And there's some things that, look, all leaders and politicians get lied about to some extent. He's not a hero of mine, but I'm big on, let's call BS when we see it. And right now,
and by the way, you can say bullshit on my channel. If you want.
Well, right now, what's going on, particularly in the Western media, is a spin-up, a melodramatic spin-up for reasons other than are being cited. And I find it hilarious that, an organization like Fox News is in essential agreement with, their counterparts over this Russia thing. And basically, my view is this. If you understand, going back the history of the Ukraine and Russia, you have to understand that during World War II, the state that, we all know famously in history that the Soviets put up a huge fight against Nazi Germany, okay? And
without which we'd all be speaking German and I wouldn't be here.
Very, very likely. However, the Ukraine, and it's not Ukraine, it's the Ukraine.
I know several Ukrainians that would be of a different opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm sure Ukrainians would, but but the Ukraine was the state that opened arms to Nazi Germany and collaborated with them, okay, and worked essentially against their own brothers, okay, in their part of the world. And you have to, for whatever the details of that are, you have to understand how most Russians feel about the Ukraine because of that. There is still a presence of post-war neo-era Nazism in the Ukraine. Most Americans don't know that. They all they're doing is hearing the rah-rah and the rhetoric, because here's what's going on. We're in a midterm election year, and we got another presidential coming up in 2 years. Okay, so there's the political motive, and you've got the neocons on the right, and you've got military-industrial complex who always makes money when there's warfare. So I see Putin is doing, and essentially he's doing what he said he was going to do, and what he said yesterday he was doing, and that was striking military targets, not invading with troops, and does not intend to occupy. He's just striking military targets. Now, as long as that's what he continues to do, and he doesn't occupy, where's this big invasion?
So the people that have gone into Ukraine from Russia are just peacekeepers.
And what have they done going in there? They were asked by the two groups of people that used to have their own independent, republic or state or whatever, and they've never wanted to be part of the Ukraine, and they just want their own little state back.
Pro-Russia states, yeah.
Yeah. And they asked the Russians for military help. Now, here's the thing. We do the same damn thing.
Oh, sure.
All over the world. Sometimes it's righteous, sometimes it's not. Okay? And yeah, I'm a military veteran. You're darn right. I believe in defending our country and helping our allies and things like that.
Spreading our brand of democracy around the world.
But I've also, which I do sincerely believe is a much better influence than the Marxist philosophies have ever been, but that's a different discussion. But yeah, my thing though is I'm old enough and experienced enough to know that if something's bullshit, I, as a military guy, I wouldn't want to be part of it if it's bullshit, because when wars happen, things get broken and people die. And most people that are the loudest rah-rahs are the ones that don't really understand what it's all about. Now, to answer your question real quick, to finish answering that part of the question, look, Putin is not the Dr. Evil from Austin Powers villain that they're making him out to be in our media and stuff. This is just ridiculous, the perspective going on here. So, right now he's only doing what he said he was going to do, and that's, it is limited. But boo-hoo, it's military action. Things are getting broken. People are dying. It's the way that shit happens. Now, as my main concern, you hit the nail on the head. I'm not concerned about Russia, getting into it with Russia, okay? I'm absolutely concerned about what China's move is going to be, okay? And when you pay attention to international media, Chinese representatives are saying, hey, they're ready to, buddy up and ally with Russia.
They have, in fact.
Yeah.
Economically.
Yeah. So, yeah, that should be a concern that they would make a move into Taiwan if we were to get into it with Russia over the Ukraine, okay? Which I hope we don't, because it's a mixed enough bag over there that, sorry, but there's some, you folks need to clean aspects of your own house before you go asking for allies to send their young men and women over there to die for you, okay? And the Ukraine is a mixed bag. And I don't want to offend any Ukrainians, but I think you'll agree that there are plenty of Americans who don't really understand the shitty things our government has done. Okay. And
like United Fruit Company.
Whatever, going back that far, even more recently. Okay. There's going to be citizens that are going to say, that's my country. It's like, okay, that may be your country, but some of their shitty past, you got to accept that. And there's going to be karma, and there's going to be, maybe the occasional smackdown for that. And you got to be realistic and honest about your own country. You can't just have blind patriotism. But my concern is what China will do. And here's the thing. What do I think will happen? It depends. And
yes,
I
specifically worded the question as to what you think will happen.
Yeah. I think if anything leads to a global conflict, it could be that. But it depends on what the current people occupying the White House want to do. It always depends upon that. I'm cynical enough, realistically cynical. If it works for them politically to do nothing, they'll try to get away with doing nothing. They'll let China take Taiwan, they'll, whatever. Or if it works for them politically, they'll get us into a war. And that would be ugly. A world war would be very ugly, folks. It ain't gonna be 1941 with propeller airplanes and
Axis and allies,
diesel powered tanks and jeeps and on and so forth. It would be ugly, and ugly bad things would happen real quick. And we do not want that.
No, I don't think anyone wants that.
Well, there's
well, except for chicken hawk warmonger John Bolton, who for some reason, was interviewed on MSNBC.
Because he any chance that wiener gets to have his face on TV and spout his neocon imperialist crap, he'll do it, because that's who he's representing, those neocon bastards, and we know who's behind them historically.
Yep.
Okay. Now here's another interesting thing about Ukraine, and I know Ukrainians, people know, are just going to shit their pants over this comment, but sorry, history is on my side. Okay. Putin, in his speech last night, one of his addresses he was making, I mean, I asked another buddy of mine, well, Joseph Farrell, who was watching it, I said, did he say what I thought he said? And he goes, yep, he said it clearly. He said, blah, 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 we're doing this because yada, yada, yada. And he included the denazification of elements of the Ukraine. He said the words. Now, Joseph Farrell points out a quote that, forgive me, I can never remember the guy's name who said it, but it's a quote this guy said years ago. He said, it's not the Nazis in Europe we have to worry about. It's the Nazis in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And folks,
case in point would be January 6th of last year.
Oh, you mean the faux insurrection?
The insurrectionists, yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's astonishing. You know, that whole thing's another discussion.
It is.
It's because the people that were burning cities down and shooting and killing security guards and cops and other people and stuff, those weren't insurrectionists. You know, those were pure as the driven snow little angels with a genuine beef, you know, but people standing there with red hats who walk in going, hey, look, we're in the Senate chamber. You know,
where's Nancy Pelosi?
That's an insurrection. God damn them for labeling it that. And the karma is going to go up their backsides, but don't get me started on that. I just think we need to be, you know, more honest about whatever country you're in. We all need to be honest about our own countries, and we need to be more honest about, you know, instead of spewing. I mean, my gosh, I dip into the American media and just laugh my butt off with the rhetoric. They had one reporter who was live from the Ukraine on Fox, right? And he says, and this happened twice, but this particular one, he says, the planes are roaring overhead and there's explosions. You can hear them. And he stopped. You could have heard a pin drop. Right. There's no planes. There's no explosions. And then as he's talking with Harris Faulkner, he says, wait.
Who, by the way, used to be the news lady here in Kansas City.
Really? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, he stops her and he says, I got to put my helmet on. Oh, you put your helmet on. Do what you got. I'm like, oh my God, the drama, you know.
I did see a video today of, I mean, somebody was behind the camera, but it was a military person of some sort. They had, you know, the camouflage hat, helmet on. Yeah. And was freaking out because missiles were flying overhead. And he was like, look, you can see them. And you could see the missiles coming in and hitting targets.
Okay.
And
was he close to them?
It looked really, he was close enough that if it were me, I couldn't be, you know, further away.
Well, look, when I was in Afghanistan, I'm sitting in a little place known as the Tally Bar, and we heard
the Tally Bar.
Yeah, we heard we heard a little commotion outside, and then a boom shook the ground, and really just not that many yards away from where we're sitting there having a beer, a missile had been fired by Taliban soldiers off in the distance and had exploded in the compound next to ours.
You mean Al-Qaeda?
Yeah. And in the compound next to ours. And we just sat there going, oh, wow, did you hear that? Yeah, okay. We kept drinking our beers. And then our security guy comes in about 15 minutes later with a still warm piece of twisted hunk metal that was part of that rocket. So, that's why I ask. And a couple of other times I've been, closer to those things than reporters usually get. So that's why always when I see them doing their ducking and oh, look at that, I pay attention to how close they are. And I'm like, okay. But, that's
This
neither.
one was close enough that it looked like it was only a few blocks away. You could see the explosion, but you couldn't see anything coming.
I mean, there is a full scale, air assault going on there. I mean, look how many targets and targets around the various cities that they've struck. Yeah, it's going on. It's going on over there. But what cracks me up are the two that I've seen. See, can you hear it? Nothing. You could hear a bird tweeting.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, you might not want to, grease that puppy so hard, as the guy said in Heartbreak Ridge. It just, but what concerns me is it was just like after 9/11. I mean, I was still in a national security game. When 9/11 happened, I was in the Middle East, and I couldn't get home for another 3 weeks. And I remember when I did get home, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like to see the national solidarity and everything, but there was something weirdly hypnotic or artificial about all the rah flag waving and the putting the American flag magnets on cars and everything, and it just had this weird inauthentic feeling. And then in the subsequent years, when I began to look at 9/11, we all started learning some really weird things about 9/11. I mean, now I look back on it, and what it was this this button that was pushed in everybody's psyche, and it just there was there was some type of thread through that particular type of patriotism that was not right. And that's what I feel in this situation. There's this thread of rah, Putin's the evil guy. It's like there's a bunch of people who just want a villain, and they're being given one.
Yeah.
And so and just like Stephen Campion was just saying about 40 minutes ago about how, like in UFO world, if you got two people who don't agree with each other, they demonize each other very often, or at least, that, let's be honest and fair, the ET hypothesis people do the most demonizing. And,
right.
If you don't agree with them and their religion, you get demonized. And that's kind of the patriotism that's going on. If you don't agree with the company line, then get
out of the company.
Yeah, here come the pitchforks and the torches. You're the monster to be hunted down. And it always bothers me when I see military people, veterans and stuff on the news and stuff that are all rah for let's go to war, or falling for something that, lowly captain goes, there's something funny about this narrative. So all I'm saying is I try to be cautious about the narrative, because from the counterintelligence perspective, when you know firsthand that games are played on the public with perception management, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's like when you learn the truth about polygraph. Okay. And I and others who did my specialty, we were taught the cold, hard, dirty truth about polygraph.
Which is
it's bullshit. There's no such thing as a lie.
Is it still admissible in court as
evidence?
No,
it never has been in its
really?
80-year history. Yeah, and there's a reason for that. Is because, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful intimidation machine. It works on a lot of people.
It measures the galvanic response.
Yeah, and well, before you even plug it up, they get 70% of their confessions before the machine's even plugged up. It's an intimidator. It's mostly an intimidator. Me, I have been known to doze off right before the test starts. Like when they got me hooked up and I'm waiting for them to come back in, I'm like, because I don't worry about it. First of all, I don't have anything to hide from them. I'm not going to lie to them about anything. So I don't worry about it. But, but it's the same thing with, perception management. once you learn about that, you know it when you see it. You recognize it, and there's no way
It
you
reminds me of
fall for it.
manufacturing consent.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, by the way, which autograph book you will be giving away for our giveaway tonight.
Hadn't thought about that yet.
Okay, well,
Let
you
me
think
figure
about
that.
it.
Which ones have we done so far? We've done Secret Missions 5, and we've done what else?
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back into the way back.
Oh, wait a minute.
on
Yeah,
that.
because you sent me like that box of 5 or 6, right? That I autographed for you. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and then I bought more,
Yeah.
so I'm loaded for bear. But
Well, let's see. Have
Yeah.
I done Shimmering Light?
Maybe. I'm not
What
sure.
about what do you think your folks would be interested
go
in?
through most of the episode tonight, and
Yeah.
by the end, we'll have a good handle on which one we should
Well,
give away.
You tell me which of my books you think the audience would be most interested in. And
I will.
That's
I
the
will.
one we'll do.
And I'd like to also mention Walter has a great channel, and he's criminally undersubscribed. So check it out, and you can go hang out with him weekly instead of just monthly here on Into the Fringe. Walter, what is your next film project called, and how's it going?
It is titled The Kaleidoscope Grimoire, and we're just getting started because I had a delay on a couple of things I needed, but I got those things. I don't like to say too many details because I like my movies to be, I just like it to be a fresh experience when people see them. But there was a particular prop I was waiting for, and then actor schedules. So pre-production has gone really well. I now have all the things in place I need to get started on some exterior shooting, which I hope to start next week, this coming week.
Great.
And then I will also start probably building the first set that I need to build here at the house. I'll probably start building that next weekend. So that's exciting because
So you're ramping up.
Yes. Before you know it, I'll be, shooting every week and having stills from the production and
Knee deep in
moving through it.
film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I await that film with bated breath.
I think you're gonna like it.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Have you ever experienced a haunting, poltergeist, or other paranormal activity?
Yes, I have. Oh, sorry. Let me get the back pad there. There we go. Yes, in December of '98. Well, let me preface this. My mentor, who's my uncle, who I've talked about for years, he and his wife owned a house in Prattville, Alabama. You can look it up online. It's called the Pope Golson House. There's a hyphen in there. And Golson, I think, is Golsen. I'm not sure, but it's Pope Golson House. It is now, I think, a state historical site. But the house was owned by her family, my aunt's family, for decades. And it was built in, oh my gosh, it's antebellum. It's pre-Civil War by a few decades, is my understanding, if I recall right. And I've spent many a night in that house between 1986 and 1999. And I was told that it was haunted. Even people who stayed in the house that aren't inclined to believe in such things or get into such things told me in no uncertain terms that they encountered one of the ghosts in the house. But it wasn't until the Christmas season of 1998 when I was visiting down from Ohio, because this was during the years I was assigned at Wright-Patterson. So I drove down to Alabama and visited for the Christmas holiday. And one night at about 11:30 p.m., I had just finished reading. I wasn't particularly tired. Back then, I couldn't fall asleep as easily as I'm able to now. Falling asleep was a winding down process for me. And I mention that because I wasn't on the verge of sleep. It wasn't like a half a dream. I was still awake. But I closed the book, turned the light off, and my head couldn't have been on the pillow 30 seconds when suddenly I heard a woman crying, just weeping. And in the house at the time was only myself, my uncle and my aunt, and my cousin, her daughter. And so I get up quietly, and the room I'm in adjoins the master bedroom where they're at. And I put my ear to the door, didn't hear any noise in there. I was hearing the crying coming from another part of the house. So I went to my bedroom door where I was staying, opened it up slowly, just in case there was a monster in the hall. And I looked down the hall, and I could see my cousin. Her door was open, and she was sleeping. I could see her laying there sleeping. And now I realized the crying was coming from downstairs. So I go to the just to make sure, I go to the master bedroom door, and it's ajar, and I look in there, and my aunt and uncle are snoozing away. They're asleep. There's no TV on. My cousin's asleep. I'm hearing a woman crying downstairs. So I go to the top of the landing. Now, it's got a spiral staircase. If you look up the Pope Golson house and you find the site with all the official photos, you'll see one photo of where you see a landing at the top of the stairs, and then the stairs continue up, and you see what looks like a bedroom door. Well, that's the room I'm talking about. That's the room I would stay in. And I was standing right there where you see in that photo at the top of that landing on the second floor. Now, down directly below was the grand foyer. This is one of those houses that had a front formal entrance and a back entrance, and it had the grand foyer going down the middle, bisecting the house with a really high ceiling. I mean, the Christmas tree they had down there itself was, I think, 12 or 14 feet high. So the foyer ceiling was higher, and there was a chandelier and stuff. And but directly under the room I would stay in, that particular room, was my uncle's library. He had converted a room into his library and his little office, and that is where later he told me the noise was coming from. But I'm standing at the top of the stairs, and I'm hearing, just like you're hearing my voice, just as clear as day, I'm hearing this woman crying, and I'm just amazed. I'm not scared. I'm not frightened. I'm not scared. Do not get me wrong. Captain Special Agent Big Bad Federal Agent Walter did not go downstairs. I wasn't going to, my bravery, with the supernatural only goes so far. But as I was standing there, I wasn't frightened or scared or didn't feel like anything evil. It was just weird. And, eventually it stopped, and I went back in my room, of course, and eventually fell asleep. And the next morning I go downstairs, and I see my uncle coming in the back door to the kitchen, and I think, "Hey, Jake, I got to tell you." And he's like, "Uh-huh, what?" I said, I heard this woman crying, and he says, "Did you go downstairs and look?" And I laughed, and I said, "You know me better than that." And he says, "You got to get over that. If you'd have gone downstairs, all you'd have seen was a woman sitting in a rocking chair holding her infant." In sometime around 1854, I think it was, he told me that one of the previous owners of the house, the wife had lost a child during that season, that particular Christmas week. And he said her ghost will show up. And he says, "You should have gone down and taken a look. She's not a scary monster. You would have just seen a woman crying because of her baby had passed away." I'm like, whoa, okay. I guess I should have, you know, if I was there again and heard that, I would. I mean, interestingly enough, I'm much more um, courageous, I guess you'd say, in that regard. Something
Right.
that he had hoped he'd get me to during his lifetime, but you know, it was. I'm not kidding. It's as real as you're hearing my voice now, and you know, unless he was pulling some elaborate hoax with some type of recorded thing, I I think it was some type of, now, you know, that gets into a discussion of what ghosts are. Is it an overlap between time periods, or is it a manifestation of,
Hmm.
you know, someone from the past? I don't know, but it was it was real. The experience was, you know, definitely real, and it was fascinating.
I researched a book for 10 years called Kansas Ghosts:
Hmm.
The Dead Walk in Kansas.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I didn't have, uh, the wherewithal to be able to cover the entire state. So I set up a website and had associate researchers from all over the place. And once they became associate researchers, they didn't do anything. So, ironically, that book never materialized.
Yeah.
Okay, what can you tell us about your UFO sighting? The dome shaped object that hovered directly over your house.
Well, it was. Many people watching know that I this week released a video that I did last year for an event that goes into the details of it. So, you know, again, if they want to hear even more details and see the imagery, it's over at the Walter Bosley channel, and I just posted it on Monday night. So it's not far down the list. But basically, it was in December of 2014, the 10th of December. And I call her kid number two, Liliana, my kid number two. Um, Her boyfriend uh, was coming home because he was staying with us. He was coming home from his job. He's like a chef and a maitre d' kind of guy now and stuff. He's been in restaurants for a long time, so he works at night. So he was coming in from his night job, and he came in the house and he says, "Walter, come out and look at this thing. It's there's something above the house." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." You know, I'm thinking, oh, he's seeing a helicopter because we get helicopters, you know, all interesting formations of the lighting and stuff on them, or he's seeing a satellite or something. So I go out there and my jaw drops because there's this thing that is not necessarily that high above the house. I mean, um, I'm terrible at this on the fly, but it couldn't have been any higher than 70 feet. It might have been as low as 50. And I immediately, after seeing this thing and just going, whoa, I ran inside. I got my Sony Handycam, which shoots 1080 resolution, and I came back out. The thing was still there. The kid's boyfriend was still there, and we're just watching this thing. And I get the camera going, and I start it, and we're just going, wow, what the heck is that? And you know, about a moment after the camera gets going, and I have this thing, um, it starts dumping this molten substance over the side, and then it starts moving. Now, he told me that it had come, he had seen it moving before it stopped over the house, and he said the direction it came from essentially is northwest of where we live. And it was continuing in a southeastern, east by southeast direction. But it started dumping this substance, and it dumped it a few times as it was finally, you know, as it started moving away from the house. Now, this
Could
thing
it
did not wobble. It
could it be
wasn't.
described as slag?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you know, and I was familiar, of course, with those UFO stories about the slag. You know, that goes
Sure.
all the way back to Maury Island. Um, so the thing is moving away, and it's moving with a steady attitude and altitude, meaning It kept its altitude and its attitude. It wasn't doing this. It was definitely under control of itself. We had kind of a low cloud coverage that night. And I would imagine up high there was enough of a breeze that if it was something like a Chinese lantern or something fluttery, we would have seen that. Not at all. And there was a rotating, looked like dynamic, organic, some type of burning illumination that was spinning inside the thing. And then it moved away and eventually disappeared into that low cloud coverage. But what I got on tape, which is in the video I posted at my YouTube, what I got on tape was just, an indiscernible blob of light. You see it dumping stuff over the side, but it looks like more indiscernible blobs of light. And as I say in the video, I'm looking at this thing and going, no way, because the other witness and I, what we were seeing was, first of all, closer than what the video depicts. And we were seeing the detail that I describe and draw in the sketches. And so I came away a believer in the idea that whatever this thing was, whatever these things can be, they have a way of keeping themselves from being electronically or magnetically recorded. Because what you see on that tape is, or the video, sorry, the digital video is, it's very disappointing. It's not convincing. I don't blame anybody for saying, well, what is that? That could be a Chinese lantern. Well, it wasn't. Now, being an investigator, I'm investigation minded. So as we're looking at this thing early on, once I get the camera going, I tell him, describe to me exactly what you are seeing.
While the tape is running?
And he tells me he's seeing the same thing I'm seeing. And that's the reason I asked him that, was I wanted to make sure that he was seeing what I'm seeing, and that how I'm describing this, is accurate, because there's a level of excitement going on. There's a level of what you call anxiety going on during this, because, this is my one honest to goodness UFO experience.
Sure.
And now here's the rest of the story. By 2014, I had finished the Empire of the Wheel trilogy, and anybody who's followed me, heard me talk about it, or read those books knows the very strange world that I entered and stayed in for a solid 7 years. And this was the 7th year of my Empire of the Wheel journey. We're talking synchronicities. We're talking what appear to be paranormal manifestations. We're talking people following me from my home. We're just any manner of stuff, okay? And early on, 7 years prior, when I was doing the initial investigation for the first book, I had gone out to a particular establishment to talk to their historian. Only nobody was there to talk to, and what I found on their site was some type of mandala painted on the ground at their site. And a few years after that, I was out there one afternoon and had a very strange experience. I saw the image of what looked like at the time, what I saw was Pallas Athena, the goddess Athena, okay, with the owl on her shoulder. And at the time, I was still new to this figure Hecate, who, is the true identity of the Catholic saint, Saint Catherine of Alexandria. There was never any Catherine of Alexandria. She's totally made up. The Catholic Church admitted this some years back. And she's actually the goddess Hecate mixed with Hypatia of Alexandria, someone who did live. But Athena has a connection, a thematic connection to Hecate. Okay. And Hecate was the central figure in this Empire of the Wheel thing. So there I'm seeing an image of Athena, and she was, I don't want to say burned onto the mountain, but, particularly out here in the desert part of the country, on a mountainside, sometimes they use rocks, but if you do a controlled burn, right, on a grassy surface. You get that kind of brownish wood burning kit kind of look on the side of a mountain, and you can make it any shape you want. And that's what this looked like, this head and shoulders image of Athena with her helmet and the owl on her shoulder. It looked like someone had fashioned it into the terrain. It wasn't like a statue. It wasn't like an actual, here's the goddess, in the flesh. It was like somebody fashioned it on the terrain. And that's what I saw one afternoon in 2010. Now, 4 years later, I had gone out to that thing painted on the ground, and I'd studied all of it, and it had been part of the Empire of the Wheel experience. I didn't write about it. It was one of the things I kept private, but I took research associates out there with me over the years, a few, very few. The day in December 2014 that we saw the UFO, that afternoon, I had gone out there and taken one of my closest research associates, who happened at that time to have been my neighbor. Okay. He was living in the UFO was hovering over both our houses that night. And that afternoon, he and I had gone out to the site, okay, and measured every line and dimension of the mandala and took pictures. Because I had never done that. Over the years, I had never actually measured, all the lines and stuff. And that night, that mandala is located northwest from where the house is. So later that night, this UFO comes from that direction, the northwest, stops over the house, is dumping a substance, and then continues on. Well, I to this day, of course, in my mind, there's a connection there. There's some connection to that mandala, the fact that I was out there on that particular day, and this thing appears coming from that direction. And what's really weird, this is in my video, and this is a more recent discovery of mine. The direction in which it was going, for years I've known, we've all known about the Integratron. The first time I went out there was in 1987. But in the general direction that this thing moved away from the house was in the direction that the Integratron is from my house. And when I was putting this report together last year, I was doing some research, and that's when it hit me. Oh my God, the shape of the UFO was identical to the shape of the dome roof of the Integratron. What the hell's going on here? And look, one thing I do when I'm in the middle of research on something, I do not share every little detail publicly,
Right.
until I've thoroughly analyzed and stuff. But I have found, and I'll talk about this eventually, but I have found, and I'm following up on it, a reason to think or suspect that there is some connection between the Integratron, George Van Tassel's interests, and this mandala. And so I'm in the middle of trying to follow up on that, but it's the evidence is stark. And I
wanted to jump in here and say,
yeah.
I think that you may have buried the lead on your sighting on Goat Mountain. Let me share my screen here. And
Goat Mountain, that's part of the video where I show you that the image out there, which I first saw in 2011, is that's how.
This is the one you were talking about here.
That's Goat Mountain. That's out at the Integratron.
Right.
I don't know what that red circle is.
Look, this is what I saw. Look at the face here.
Oh, it looks like a helmet.
Eye, nose,
helmet,
mouth.
Very good. Well, look at the helmet. Look at the very Spartan ancient god type helmet too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, good eye.
Yeah. Thanks.
So that's astonishing what you saw there, because that helmet is exactly the kind of helmet. So also, when I did research, I have an image that I'll have to dig up and find, but and share it with you. But there appears to be in the terrain to this day what I saw. And it looks like over time, of course, it's expanded and it's stretched and it's shifted. But 12 years ago, that's probably what I saw. Now, here's the interesting thing. The image that I saw, I had been going out there a lot between 2007 and 2010 when I saw the image and never saw it. And I went out there a lot after 2010 and never saw it again. It was just on that one day at that time that I saw the image of Athena. But yet, there's a trace of what I saw there today. It's, yeah. Needless to say, there's nothing about this experience that was extraterrestrial. I'll say that.
Sure.
This was something else. And the video that I have is not going to convince anyone of anything other than there was something in the sky that night and it did do what we said it did. And that's more than
do you
some people
by
have.
any chance happen to have that video so that you could share your screen and we could see a little bit of it?
I don't think it's on this computer.
Okay.
Yeah. But what I'll do is I'll shift it over so that in the future,
We can see it.
we can do that. But it's if they go to the Walter Bosley channel at YouTube, and just a few days ago, just Monday night, I posted my UFO encounter, and the whole thing's in there, so they can, wow, the image of that helmet that you circled, that's amazing. What's interesting is the other face, it's like a cross between a C-3PO and a Mexican wrestling mask, right? I mean, it's wild. But this is the mountain. You can see that, and you can see the face that I circled in the black there. And now I can't wait to get back out there and look for this other thing that you picked out. But you can see that from the Integratron. It's plain as day when you know it's there. What's interesting about that photograph, it might be that the reason I didn't notice it out there and in the past is that the contrast, I brought up the contrast so that the face that I saw would come out more plainly. But when you're out there and to look at Goat Mountain, because in 2011, I pointed it out to people who'd been going out there for years and never seen it. And they saw it. They were, whoa. I've never noticed that before. How long has that been there? And in 2011, I said, I don't know how long it's been there, but there it is now. So, there's more to come on this incident, certainly. But it's something that I didn't talk about publicly for 3 years. The first time I mentioned it publicly was in 2017. And I contacted Jacques Vallée. He sent me an email back. It was right before the holidays. He said he was going to Europe for the holidays. And after the new year, he would contact me and, have some of his people talk to me. Never heard back from him. He blew me off. I'm pretty sure I probably got sandbagged by people who just don't like my perspective.
Yeah.
So, oh well, his loss, because he apparently at that time was into studying specifically the UFOs that dump the molten substance over the slag. And, hey, it really happened. If some knucklehead in his outfit thought I was making something up just to get at their beloved.
By this time, maybe you could try again.
I'm actually not interested.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I think my own experiences and my own research have taken me farther along that thread than his has. Oh, Walter, that's a bold statement. Farther than Jacques Vallée? Well, yeah, and that's
in that particular case, yeah.
Yeah, that's in that particular topic or whatever. That's no harm, no foul to him. I have no animus against Jacques Vallée. Neither do I put him on a pedestal like a lot of people in the community do.
I also wanted to ask you, did you report your sighting to anyone?
I think I mentioned it after I was asked to speak at a MUFON chapter in Orange County I think it was 2019. Yeah, I think it was 2019. And after that, I mentioned it to one of the folks there, and I think I didn't follow through because I don't think I don't think it was MUFON's bailiwick. I mean, what's MUFON? I did look up to see if there were other sightings of
Well, that's the
UFOs.
reason that I asked, because
Yeah,
if you see things like a disc hovering over your house,
yeah.
if you
Maybe someone
report
else
it,
has seen it, right?
then someone else that saw it, then you've given credibility to their sighting.
Oh, and the reason that my buddy who went out to the mandala with me, it was almost midnight. He's an older guy, and he and his wife were asleep, and it didn't cross my mind to wake him up. It just because the moment it was happening, I wasn't making a connection immediately. The connection didn't come till like an hour later, and it's the middle of the night, and then it honestly didn't cross my mind. Oh shoot, I should have woke Rafe up, But anyway, so that's why he didn't see it. But yeah, I just honestly, I thought, this really isn't MUFON's bailiwick. I can do
Mhm.
the research to find out if there were other sightings,
Sure.
and there weren't. So, the weird thing is, it absolutely had personal implications for me due to my research and the experiences I was having. And yet, a witness who had nothing to do with that research and those experiences also saw it. So,
What do you think the slag dumped by the UFO is made of? And did you
well,
collect any samples? And if so, have it analyzed?
I tried to. What I found the next day um, was on the ground in the spots where this slag would have hit. I found multiple instances of this very wispy, very fragile charcoaly type substance that disintegrated. I got a balsa stick and I had a baggie and I was going to try to collect it like evidence, and it just essentially disintegrated. Um, so it was virtually impossible to collect. But the way I could describe it is that just what I said. It was fragile. It was like a fluffy burnt charcoal. Here's an interesting thing. Subsequently, when I was doing research on what else could it be,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's a particular mushroom that apparently deteriorates and degrades in that way. And we started having mushrooms sprouting in the neighborhood and along that pathway where it had gone after this.
So they were dumping some sort of plant food that mushrooms like.
or if some people are familiar with Vallet's line of research with the Tuatha De Danann, or Joshua Cutchin's line of research, the mushrooms suggest the discussion of the other people and not the extraterrestrial,
Fairy folk.
the fairy folk. What do I think? That's what people probably want to know. I'll cut to the chase. What the UFO meant to me was not anything to do with extraterrestrials per se, but it had the hallmarks of symbolism connected to the mysterious Tuatha De Danann. And I interpret the UFO that we saw as what's called the Cauldron of Dagda. Dagda is like the father, main god figure of the Tuatha De Danann, and his cauldron, when it appears to express ownership over a territory, or to smite, or to give blessings. And they say that when you see the cauldron of Dagda, under the circumstances I did, and it moves through the sky, it's a flying cauldron, it gives you a blessing. Okay. And I look at what was dumping as the sign of some kind of blessing.
You mentioned in one of your videos that it looked like it was 15 feet across and 30 feet high in the center. Is that right?
No. The other way around. Maybe at the widest 30 across and 15.
Oh, and 15.
But,
okay, yeah,
but,
yeah.
But the dimensions, if I have the dimensions wrong, if you look at the picture of the dome top of the Integratron, that's the... Now, the size, I don't know if it's the same size as, if it was, exactly the same size as the dome, but the shape and the linear dimensions, that's the dimensions of it. But which I think would roughly be half as high as it is wide, I think.
Right.
Around there. So,
now I know that you're not a pro ETH guy.
I'm not anti ETH.
No, you leave room for the possibility.
Yeah, because
But my question here is that the craft that you saw could have been ET if, let's say, they were advanced enough to make it bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, which in UFO lore has been reported.
Okay, that's some. I know that. Yeah, it's. I don't know what I think enough of that to comment intelligently. I'm gonna have to look at that more closely. Those accounts more closely. Before I could comment intelligently on it. Look, anything you see odd in the sky could be ET, but here's what I go on. Context is important. Context can be everything. And I have much more evidence pointing to the other option than I do the ET option. See? Now, someone could say, well, the ETs could have just been using that symbol. Okay, yeah, and then the ETs can make themselves look like Santa Claus, or the ETs can make themselves look like a helicopter. And this is part of my problem with the ETH culture, is no matter what you tell them, by God, they find a way to... It's ETs because they could, do the hokey pokey and turn themselves around. That's my problem. It's not a problem with the ETH. It's the dedicated culture that thinks everything is, and that's their first go-to. That's my problem. But yeah, in this particular case with the UFO that I saw, to me, there's so much more there that backs up the Tuatha than it being ETs.
And you said that you had multiple witnesses. Did you follow up with them? And what did they think it was?
No, I had one with me.
Oh, you had one?
Yeah. And that was my kid's boyfriend. So,
and did he mention what he thought it was?
He didn't know what to think. He just knew he saw this weird thing in the sky, then we were both seeing it, he's very much interested in UFOs and things like that, but some of my ideas and the things I'm into, I think, kind of scare him a little bit.
I can see that.
Because even though I think, certainly I have no problem with the idea of the traditional, nuts and bolts craft coming from another world with people who are just simply from another planet. They're not supernatural. Of course, yeah, I think that's out there. I think they've come here. I think they will again, blah, blah, blah. And, but there's a whole lot going on that has nothing to do with that. And
after all,
it can be scary.
You have a spooky mind.
That's right, a spooky mind. So, for me, I acknowledge in that book and in the video, could somebody have been hoaxing me? Absolutely. And I commend them. If what I saw that I talk about in that video and that I saw on that night, if it was a hoax, it was damn good. It was excellent. Bravo, because it was just so amazing and convincing. Now, here's the thing, though. It would have to be somebody who was intimately familiar with my research and experiences enough, and the kid's boyfriend was not. I've not had an in-depth discussion with him at all about my research. And we're talking aspects of my research that I've not spoken about publicly, and certainly hadn't at that time, and had not written about. Okay. So somebody hoaxing me, okay, is somebody that'd have to be intimately familiar. Now, the only other possibility I can think of off the top of my head is my buddy Rafe, who went out there with me, wow. And he would have had to have some help.
A lot of help.
Doing this. Yeah. So it would have been a pretty elaborate hoax done by somebody intimately familiar. Now, that raises the possibility of indeed someone doing something and wanting me to key in and react to what appeared to be a manifestation of the Tuatha Dé Danann. And certainly someone with a sufficiently advanced technology could have pulled that off. Someone with that kind of technology and intimately familiar with what I have been researching. Now, you can see it from my house, okay? One end, the flight line end of what used to be Norton Air Force Base, which is now San Bernardino International Commercial Airport, blah, blah, blah. Stuff's going in there all the time, FedEx planes and stuff like that. But because of my background, I'm convinced that there's still a U.S. Air Force presence over there. Why? Because former Norton Air Force Base, the way where it's situated and located, we're close enough to Edwards that when they're doing some type of flight testing, in the past, if something was going wrong with the airplane and they had to bring it down safely, they would come to Norton, to the flight line. Oh, shoot, something's going on. Where you at? I'm over San Bernardino. Oh, just take it into Norton, go into the hangar, blah, 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 right? So Norton was part of that support function, just like former George Air Force Base, where my dad was stationed in Hesperia, and the other Air Force bases, in the area. So to me, it's practical that the Air Force would probably still have at least one hangar over here. And, when they need to do something Air Force-y, there it is. So if I was being gamed, and the reason I bring this up is I said someone with sufficient technology. Well, with the various drone technologies and all the things they can do, well, certainly my former bosses, the Air Force, I have to point that out because the former Air Force Base is here and it's still a functional, flight center. So could it have been some type of government drone technology and someone was pulling a good one on me? Yeah. But then you have to say, okay, why would the U.S. Air Force want to pull something like this on me, who's been off active duty since '99, and I'm just this guy living in a house here and writing crazy books? See what I'm saying? Unless what I'm researching
getting a little too close to the truth.
Yeah, and golly, what would the Empire of the Wheel stuff have to do with the Air Force? Could it have to do with why the Air Force put Norton Air Force Base here in the first place? Because Norton Air Force Base, as we know, has a history with the UFO world. Remember, Norton is the place where the audiovisual command used to be, and both Jacques Vallée came out here when it was still Norton Air Force Base, when he was pitched by the Avis command to get involved with Air Force UFO interests. He writes about that. And I think it was someone from here, former Norton, that had contacted Linda Moulton Howe about the Holloman Air Force Base film.
Right.
So Norton, and it is believed, it has been reported that two things of interest, that after the alleged Roswell craft was retrieved, that one of the places it was stored, the craft, not the bodies, was right here at Norton Air Force Base. And it was right here at Norton Air Force Base that Mark McCandlish, the late Mark McCandlish, says that his friend told him he saw the the flying saucer, allegedly reverse engineered craft that Mark was famous for having done a schematic of.
The
That allegedly,
ARV, as they're called.
yeah, the ARV. Allegedly, the ARV was in a hangar here at Norton. So Norton has a background with weird stuff, okay, when it was, the overt Air Force base. So that's very thin to me, though, okay? That's very thin to me. Why would that history have anything to do with, okay, the only thing it would have to do with is whatever technology they used. Maybe it was the ARV, now that I think about it, because the ARV has a dome top above the beveled saucer portion. Ooh, there's something I need to look at. But why would the ARV happen to be over my house dumping molten substance or slag? Gee, on the night of the very day I was messing around out there. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
it's there would have to be so much.
Synchronicity.
Yeah, there would have to be so much coordinated for it to have been something from the Air Force Base. So I return to the Tuatha De Danann.
And I have a question about that later. I wanted to ask you a couple of tough questions. These aren't gotcha questions. I'm not that kind of a interviewer, but
Right.
you say that you don't reject the ETH in toto, but
Right.
you seem to prefer to find more mundane explanations. Isn't that kind of a confirmation bias, just like the wide-eyed UFO believers or those that think that UFOs are all ET controlled?
No. And here's why. Because those mundane things that I have shown a preference for are things that you can point to the world of technology development. You can actually point to the history of aerospace engineering and classified development of technology. There is tons of evidence to support that, okay? Whereas the ET hypothesis is still purely hypothesis at this point, okay? Whereas the hypothesis that I'm not the only one who puts it out there, but I subscribe to is, hey, we know for a fact that there has been technology, in some cases stuff that's amazing, and stuff that was confused for being from other worlds until it was made public, the F-117, for example. So there's much more historical fact and evidence on the side of when I say I think 90% of legitimate UFO reports are likely some type of classified technology. But remember, that leaves 10%, which I don't think are explained by that technology, and a sliver in that 10% could be ET. Well, folks,
could be, yeah.
This all it takes is one ET craft, and we're there. We've proven it, right? We know without a doubt. And I say that in that 10%, there could be 50 of those cases in that 10% a year that could be ETs. My God, I mean, that's 50 possible ETs that I'm allowing for. So, but the reason I do this, I think, to further answer your question, the reason I do this is so that I try to contribute to people not going off on wild goose chases, people not falling for scams, people just not misleading themselves, because we want to know the truth of this, meaning we want to know which ones really are the ET cases. We want to know who they are, where they're from, right? We don't want to waste time with bullshit storytellers that the ufology community, mostly the ETH people, just love to embrace every time they come down the pike. And they are singularly the most gullible demographic in our community. And it wastes a lot of time. People can waste their money, their time, and why? Why not help them be more discerning? And we could reduce a lot of the nonsense and BS that we have to endure in our community. If we would just help people be more discerning and say, hey, I got no problem with accepting that there's ETs, but your particular BS, nah, that doesn't fly. And you've been telling us for 5 years that you're going to disclose this and you've got something and you've got knowledge, but you never reveal that knowledge. You never show us anything. Come on, you're full of crap too. Get out of here until you reveal something, only bringing it up to a certain point and then saying, well, but my NDA doesn't allow me to go further. I call bullshit flag on that. That person doesn't have anything that they've ever intended to share. They probably don't even have anything to share. They're just working the stage, working the show.
You mentioned earlier Athena and the owl. Can you go into more depth on that, please?
You mean as far as what I saw or who she is and what that means?
Yes.
Athena is traditionally, she's a goddess of war. There are multiple gods and goddesses of war. She's a goddess of war. That's why you see her with the helmet. You see her with the spear a lot. She's loaded for bear, ready to fight. But she's also the goddess of wisdom. Okay. And if you're familiar with ancient literature, she is particularly fond of mankind, of humankind. To put a finer point on it,
more so than the other gods, anyway.
Yeah, and she's especially fond of Odysseus, for example, in the Odyssey. And if you read the Odyssey and you see how Athena interacts with Odysseus, that's the best way to describe her. She comes to him when he's in a situation, in some type of pickle or situation where he's done everything he can. She comes in and helps him out. Okay. Or she'll appear to him in the guise of human beings, of people, and give him a little hint, a clue, give him a little encouragement. But she looks upon him like, when a mother is, has like the son that she's really fond of, or the sister who loves her brother. She's got a soft spot in her heart for specifically Odysseus, but mankind in general. And so this reflects that she's accessible to humankind. Okay. I think that there is a gender thing also, more technically a sex, not sex as in the act of sex, but we've misused the word gender,
right
next to those, but you know what I mean. I'll say gender so people don't giggle up their sleeves. There's a gender connection thing going on. I think that for women, the god figures are more the ones that they're prone to connect with, and we males are more prone to connect with the goddesses.
That makes sense.
In many cases, particularly in the case of Athena, because Athena was not born of any other god and goddess. She was born of, they say, of Zeus's head, which means of his mind. She's a different kind of creature.
Oh, you mean she wasn't literally born out of his head? She was metaphorically born.
She was metaphorically born from his head, which means of his mind. She's a very special creation of. She's his daughter, so to speak, but she was metaphorically born of his mind. And
does that mean that Zeus created her?
You could say that
she sprung forth from his mind.
Yeah, she sprung forth from him in that way. And Athena, if you want to, let's throw a Christian metaphor kind of out there for some folks. Zeus and Athena are like the Almighty God and Christ in a way. And here's why. We have this, Christ is born under non-normal circumstances, although at least, he had a mom, but also the role that Christ plays in our lives, according to the tradition, is very similar to that which Athena does, right? Because Zeus is this all hail good fellow, but if he gets pissed off at you, screw you, doesn't care, ha ha ha, cold, he can be a cold shoulder. Athena is never the cold shoulder. She's the one that gives you the sympathy when you need it. She's the one that, and boy, that my experience, in my personal experience with spiritual stuff, is God's a hard ass, okay, who's got no time to baby you. Christ is the one that says, hey man, come on, I'll help you up, come on. Christ is like Athena, okay? So just like we're told in Christian tradition that Christ is part of God or whatever, Athena is part of Zeus. She's sprung forth in a special way. So so there's that aspect of her, but she also has she draws from an aspect of Hecate. Okay.
Which I'll get to in a minute.
And the owl is the clue that she draws from an aspect of Hecate, because the owl is also a familiar of Hecate.
Okay, hold on to that thought, because I have a question or two before that.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to find a similarity between the dome I'm going to start again because my mouth doesn't work. You seem to find a similarity between the dome-shaped UFO that you saw and the Integratron.
Right.
Integratron. Blah. I really can't talk today. What do you think the connection is? And would you please relate your first trip to the Integratron?
What I think the connection is, as I said several minutes back, I'm not prepared to go into that because I'm still in the early stages of investigating that. But I will say that it emerged directly from some material that I was looking at, and it stunned me. It's material that I've had for years, and I had kind of glanced at and noticed a glancing notice of the similarity, but it wasn't until I was really seeing the connection between the shape of the UFO and the dome of the Integratron that I really dove into it, and I was shocked at how what I found was just entirely resonant with other things I had been discovering and researching. So all that to say, I'm still in the middle of investigating it, so I'm not really prepared to talk about it publicly, but I will as soon as I have some type of hypothesis or conclusion to make. As far as my first experience out at the Integratron, it was in September of 1987, and I had never been out there. A previous girlfriend of mine, who was at that time a friend, we were friends many years longer than we were a thing. She and her boyfriend at the time wanted to go out there, and so I rode with them. So we go out there on a. I'm sorry, I left out a part. I was working for a guy who, in the physical therapy department of the hospital here in San Bernardino, and he had first, this is how I heard about the Integratron. He was telling me about it because he had become acquainted with Van Tassel when Van Tassel was still alive. And this guy was, I think, a teenager or something. And so that's how I first heard about the Integratron. And he was saying, yeah, you ought to go out there. He says, in fact, what are you doing this weekend? Go out there this Sunday. I'm like, okay. So that resulted in me, talking with my friend Tracy and saying, hey, you guys have been wanting to go out there. My guy I work for says we should go out there, let's go this Sunday. And she's like, okay. So they had wanted to go out there. I had heard about it. So we get in the car, and my car, and we drive out there. We find it. When you've never been out there, you kind of got to go down this street, then Belfield Road, and oh, there it is suddenly. And so we go pulling up, and there's these two guys wearing jeans and plaid shirts, and they've got mustache. One's got a mustache, one's got a beard, and they look like they need haircuts. But they're eyeballing us. They're sitting in the tailgate of a pickup truck, and they're eyeballing us real hard. But as we're pulling up to this thing, Tracy, who had gotten into, like psychic stuff and New Age, she was allegedly, this is what she was telling me, and her boyfriend was in the back seat, that she was doing some type of, she could see what was in there and who was in there. So she's telling us what she's seeing. She says, okay, there's 3 people inside it, and one is very short, one is a very large guy, and the short guy's really afraid of the large guy, but the third guy is this older man, very in a very nice suit. And so she's telling us this. She's claiming that this is what she's seeing psychically. You got to understand, back then I was skeptic about this stuff. It's like, yeah, okay, nice mind meld. I'm concerned about these 2 guys giving us the hard eyes, right? And so she says, oh, the man in the nice suit, he knows we're here. And I'm like, what? And he knows our names. And at this point, when she says that, I see, coming from what I subsequently learned was the direction of the Giant Rock Airport site, I see 2 vehicles hauling ass across the desert towards us, in our direction. And my instinct is, these guys don't want us here. These 2 cars are speeding at us. Your mind meld is telling us that some guy inside this dome building knows our names. Okay, my instinct is, we're getting out of here. Somebody doesn't want us here. So I turn the car around. I get back on the Belfield Road, which turns and goes back out to the 162, I think it is, Old Woman Springs Road. And I go hauling ass up to 162. And by that time, we're far enough away. I don't see the cars speeding in our direction, from that angle. I'm like, okay, let's take another look from a different vantage point, just right off the road up here. And let's talk about this and figure out, what the heck. So I I go just a little ways after getting back on the 162, heading north. And I pull off where there's an outcropping of rocks, a natural pull-off area. I pull off. We get out of the car. There's this huge, weird cloud way off in the distance to the north that we notice. And anyway, we're looking at that. And I'm not kidding. We had barely stepped away from the car when here comes 2 vehicles speeding up, and they pull off the road at this pullout and stop just probably about 10 or 15 yards behind our car. One of them is one of those small, if you remember in the 70s, like the small frame pickups, like the Chevy Love and the Ford, the little ones. And it had like one of those construction rack type things where they carry wood or pipes or something, And a guy was driving it. The car was some little white Datsun, if you remember Datsuns, sedan. And there was a woman probably between 35 and 40. They're wearing casual clothes. I see her in jeans and again, one of these flannel, plaid shirts. And she is behind him. And I realized these were the friggin' vehicles that were hauling ass across the desert. And now they've shown up exactly where, of course, then that they were coming in our direction. She gets out of that car and she runs up to the guy driving the pickup truck, and they're talking and they're looking at us. And, my friend Tracy and her boyfriend, they're much more new agey than me. They're all like, oh, and I'm like, back to the car. I'm like, huh? What? I'm like, back to the car. We're getting out of here. Because I realize we're being followed. Mm-hmm. And so they realize, I said, those are the cars that were coming across the desert. And then they get the message. And they hop into the car. I do a U-ey. The lady runs back to her car, and both vehicles, I've done a U-turn, and I'm heading back towards Yucca Valley. They do a U-turn, and they follow us all the way back.
Scary.
To Yucca Valley. Okay. And then we pull into, there's a Carl's Jr. there at Old Woman Springs Road. I pull into there because we're going to stop, and they have burned off from us. Okay. Before we get to the Carl's Jr., like right before they go another direction. It's like, okay, we've left. We're back in Yucca Valley. That's the town. And fine. We've left. They don't want us there. Everything's good. We go into the Carl's Jr. We hit the restrooms before we're going to order food. I come out first, and there's this older gentleman, jeans, plaid Western shirt, the kind with the pearl snap buttons, and he's got, perfect haircut. He looks like he's at least 60, maybe 65. And he's sitting there with no drink, no food, no tray, but he's sitting there reading a book. And for the life of me, I've never been able to remember. It was a paperback book, and I wished I could remember over the years.
Still, it's kind of a dead giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah, he's sitting there with no food, and he's got like this little smile on his face. And he's sitting there in a booth right outside the bathroom. So they come out, and I go, come on, we're going. We got to roll. We're not eating here. We'll go somewhere else. And by this time, they're listening to me because, we've already been followed. As we walk past this guy's table, he closes the book, he gets up, and he follows us out.
Oh, man.
And he gets in. I think it was another white vehicle. I think it was another pickup truck. That's how I recall it, small frame pickup truck. We get in the car. We head through Yucca Valley, and we're going to head back to the 10 freeway, which is, a few miles. You go through a canyon and then the straight shot. Anybody that's been there. He follows us all the way through the rest of Yucca Valley, through that canyon. And then when we get out of that canyon, and it's a straightaway, and you can see the 10 up ahead of you, there's like this one light between you and the freeway. And as we're going through that intersection, he does his Yui and heads back. Like he was making sure that, okay, they're out of Yucca Valley, they're heading back, to the 10. And so, we stopped a place called Grandma's Country Kitchen, which I think is still there. And we were like, what the heck? And so, the next day I go to work and I go in to see Dan, the guy I'm working for. And I'm telling him this story, that we encountered, and he's just kind of smiling and nodding. And here's the interesting thing. When he was telling me about the Integratron, it was the first time I noticed a couple of things hanging on his wall. And it said, Captain Dan so-and-so is U.S. Air Force. And at that time I said, oh, you were in the Air Force? He goes, yeah. I'm like, huh, okay. And at the time, that hospital, okay, this was 1987. This was during the Russian-Afghanistan war. And I don't know if you recall, but we offered humanitarian aid to the soldiers as well as the civilians that were injured there. And in one wing of our hospital during that particular time, we had children who had been Afghani children who had been wounded in the Russian-Afghanistan war. Okay. And they would be brought into the hospital and given treatment and then, sent home. This was some type of deal that the State Department, and it was being administered partially by our DOD. And what's interesting is, I would go down to that corridor, and there was a Mujahideen warrior, an old guy with the fancy curly mustache and pointy beard and the colorful Mujahideen stuff, and he had his AK-47 right there with him in the corridor of this hospital. And I'm telling you, you would walk past or down that corridor, he'd be still, he'd be at attention, a little smile, but his eyes would be on you. He'd be watching every move you were making. Well, I tell Dan about this going out to the Integratron the next day. And it's just a few days after that I come into work, and his assistant guy is in his office, and all Dan's stuff is gone. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, Dan's not here anymore. Doug got promoted. He's going to be in charge. And it's like, Dan disappears. He leaves the day after the Afghani DOD State Department thing ends. So, naturally I'm thinking, and then subsequently, as I get in my career, I think back on this and I'm like, oh, he was absolutely the POC, the point of contact for our hospital. He was the guy at our hospital that they were administering this through. He was probably, and he probably had obviously had some military DOD connection in some way. But he's the guy that essentially said, yeah, you ought to go out to the Integratron and go this Sunday. So
Ooh.
did he know what was going on out there? Did he send me because he knew what was going on there? Is this why the guy inside the building that Tracy was seeing with her psychic vision, her Superman vision, is this why this guy knew our names? I have, get this, we're into the fringe here, right? Let's get wild here. I've wondered if the older man she saw was two things, was the same man we saw in the Carl's Jr. He had just changed clothes. Okay. And I have thought subsequent to that, my gosh, could he have been the Wilson that my father told me about? That my elaborated on. Is this how, could this be one way that he knew who we were? Because in that weird, strange world that my dad was certainly brought into the Air Force, that my uncle was in for 4 decades, and he was bringing me into, grooming me for, and bringing me into, it's very generational. Okay, if they got personnel that serves them well and they like, believe me, the first people they look at to recruit for the next generation is the sons or daughters of that personnel.
Yeah,
because it's because it's easier. They know more about you than just not that
they know that you can keep a secret.
They know that you can keep a secret, but it goes deeper than that. They understand things about your psyche because of whose kid you are, and they watch you from the time you're a kid. My uncle told me, he says, look, he goes, I was assessing you and your sisters from the time you were little kids. He goes, the reason I chose you is because it became clear to me at a certain point that you're the one that's interested in things, and it doesn't scare you like it does them. He goes, it's this. He said your sisters have some of the same capabilities you have, but this stuff scares the hell out of them. They just don't want any part of it. They want to live in the real surface, superficial world. He said, you were the kid. I was the weirdo, right? I was the one that was like, oh, other dimensions, ghosties, strange things. And so yeah, and I think that might be where when people that make up crap say, I was recruited to be a time traveling space commando from the time I was
the
5
planet
years old.
Mars.
Yeah, I think that bullshit comes from, because you've heard me say it, I'm a nugget of truth guy. Okay,
right. I love that.
Yeah, I think that bullshit comes from a nugget of truth where they do, in a practical way, look at multi-generational recruiting. And think about it. My mentor was my uncle. He was family. Who has access to you from the time you're a little kid? Family, right? And so if you got family that's in the biz, it's like, hey, keep an eye on your nephews, nieces, grandkids, whatever, and if there's one you think one or two or whatever, we'll bring them in. That's how that works. It's a very down-to-earth, practical thing, but
sure.
It sounds exciting when you're being told about it, for the first time. But it's you quickly learn. It's like, okay, that's in a very practical way. So yeah, I had reason to suspect that Dan knew more about this than he was saying, and he sent. I have a feeling that he didn't expect me to necessarily to take someone with me. But it didn't. I don't think it bothered him. But who knows? Who knows who those people were out there? Who knows what exactly was going on? Who knows why exactly we were followed? Look, the thing about who was inside the dome, and my friend, who, by the way, passed away a few years, way too young, passed away a few years ago. But who knows if she was really mind melding? But what the facts that we do know is that we were followed. That is cold hard. That happened. Any three of us would, vouch for that. So,
and they had information about you that it is impossible to get. really.
Well, if what she was saying was accurate and true, yes, yeah, them knowing our names now, and I acknowledge that because there are more hardcore skeptics out there on this stuff that would say, "Oh, wow, that's the bullshit part." It's like, I see why you're saying that's the bullshit part. Now, I will tell you that personally, my opinion of her, next to my uncle, she was the most gifted and powerful person with psychic gifts that I ever knew. I tested her once when I was in my traveling days, and she nailed it. We did a cold thing. She had no idea where I was. She described the view outside my window of the place I was staying at in Islamabad, Pakistan.
Wow.
I mean, damn.
I've
She
done stuff like that, but with no training.
and she's not had any formal training at all. She was a natural at it. She also described my exact view from my balcony of my room in a hotel in Tel Aviv, looking down the Corniche to the old city, Jaffa. She described exactly what I was.
In Hebrew, it's pronounced Yafo.
Yeah, whatever. That too. Yeah. So she convinced me, and I was always impressed with her abilities. And she and my uncle and my dad are probably all getting a good laugh about me now on the other side.
I'm going to go into rapid fire mode here, Walter.
Okay.
Can you please explain the Tuatha De Dan, Hecate, Saint Catherine, and her alter ego, and maybe what they have to do with Joan of Arc and her sword?
Okay. The Tuatha De Danann, as such, by that name, we get from Celtic lore, specifically Ireland, ancient Ireland. They were these beings who came out of the sky in a great tumultuous thunder. Anthropologists love to minimize them and claim, no, they were tribes from the Mediterranean and they landed on the beaches and they used fire on the beaches to make it. What they do is they do acrobatics because God forbid we have people from other dimensions or other worlds come here, right? So I tend to ignore what the anthropologists like to say, and I like to point to what's in the Leber Gabor, whatever the book is, but it's in ancient Irish lore. They come from another world, and that's who. And there's a lot more to it than that. But Hecate, in my opinion, is one of the Tuatha De Danann because she's a chthonic goddess. What does that mean? Chthonic means their origin goes so far back, we're not exactly sure. We can Hecate's only been traced her earliest to the Black Sea region. This is even before ancient Egypt, because she has been traced to ancient Egypt, but before that, she came out of, she was known in the Black Sea region, but that doesn't mean she wasn't somewhere else first. So you have her, you have Hecate. Okay. Now, along the way, you had Alexandria in Egypt. Okay. And you had all your tumultuous, the Muslims at one time burned Alexandria. Before that, I think, new Christian fanatics burned it, blah, 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 and so forth. You had Hypatia of Alexandria, whose father was the guy who ran the famous Library of Alexandria. And it was rare because she got the kind of education that usually only men got. She was brilliant. She's a historical figure. She actually lived. And of course, she was murdered by the angry, superstitious, ignorant, stupid mob who were spun up by a king who had the hots for her. She wasn't interested. It pissed him off. So he spun up the religious fanatics against her, and she died this horrible death. So she's a part of history. So you get to where clearly there are these pagans, these barbarians who are, among the gods they worship. Hecate is very important to them. So the Catholic Church, having to take over everything, they, as they do, they decided, hey, let's create a saint that is essentially Hecate. Will Catholicize Hecate worship. That's what they did. So they took the attributes of Hecate, and they took aspects of the biography of Hypatia of Alexandria, and they put them together, and they came up with this complete lie, this Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who never existed. Okay. And that was what they used to do, this syncretic thing where, okay, we're in charge now, so as long as you Catholicize your ancient god worship, that's okay. So
you can have your holidays, they'll just be Catholic holidays.
Yeah, but we know, wink wink, that it's really Hecate. So then zip forward a few centuries and you have Joan of Arc, and she is allegedly communicating with three saints, the primary one being Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who we know is the goddess Hecate. And Saint Catherine of Alexandria, or Hecate, tells Joan, after she and the other two beings were encouraging Joan to do what she's supposed to do, Saint Catherine Hecate tells her exactly where to go get a particular sword, that it's buried behind the altar of the church of Saint Catherine of Alexandria in Firebois, I think it's called. And so Joan goes there. She digs up behind the altar. She finds the sword. She gets it cleaned up. There is a researcher named Lance Bernard who's done a fantastic essay on this, and he points out that the sword of Joan of Arc was very possibly the sword of Charles Martel, who, if you know the story of Charles Martel, a meteorite hit the night before they were going to have a big battle with the Saracens and be wiped out, right, by the Muslim army. And this meteor hits, and Charles Martel gets his blacksmith and his weapons maker. They go out there, they get that meteorite, and they fashion a sword from this meteorite. Okay. And he parlays that into, see, a sword from God, and it rallies the troops, and the rest is history. That's how they end up beating this much bigger army. That and a few slick tactics and stuff. So he goes, and I'm trying to remember immediately the connection that Bernard makes with him in this church in St. Catherine, but he goes and puts the sword, he's the one that buries it behind the altar, says Lance Bernard. So was Charles Martel, did he have some connection to Hecate also? Because he goes and puts the sword in essentially what is her church. So Joan, when she gets the sword, we know the history. She goes into, she becomes the spiritual leader of the French army. They're whipping ass on the English. Of course, the English don't like that, of course. They never do.
Never.
And as long as she has the sword, it's like Arthur's Excalibur. She can't be defeated. Even when she gets an arrow in her leg or something like that, it doesn't kill her or whatever, as long as she's got this sword. Well, she's eventually captured, but she's not carrying the special sword. She's carrying a different sword. And if you look at the trial of Joan of Arc and the transcripts, which exist, it's mind-blowing, they were obsessed with that sword. That's what they wanted to know. They would ask her more than once, where's the sword? Well, you guys got the sword when you captured me. Not that sword. You know which one we're talking about. The special sword, which disappeared. No one knows to this day where it's at. But the English, remember, were driving the trial against her. They were obsessed with where the sword was. I think, as I've talked about in books, I think it's because they really thought it was an Excalibur type of sword. Okay. But essentially, Joan, if you believe her story, she was being guided by Hecate. She was instructed by Hecate to, do what she did, and that resulted in her becoming this great, spiritual leader for France. And here's the interesting thing. In my research, thematically, because of this sword and because of the research of this Lance Bernard guy, I wonder now if Hecate wasn't also the so-called Lady of the Lake, who gave the sword to begin with to Merlin to give to Arthur. Okay, and what was Merlin and Arthur, what were they instructed to do? Return the sword to her. What did Martel do centuries later? After he gets this special sword, the sword, emerges, the meteorite, blah, blah, blah. He goes and he puts it behind the altar of a church also dedicated to Hecate, essentially. Now, think about this too. What is a sword fashioned from a meteorite? Gee, it's a sword from a stone. What was Excalibur?
Yes.
The sword in the stone.
Yeah.
I'm not the first guy to say this. Bernard points it out. Excalibur was likely, fashioned from a meteorite. And I go into this really, deeper analysis in Secret Missions 1 on all the stuff I'm talking about. But so essentially, was Hecate, who they called the Lady of the Lake, who provided Merlin and Arthur with Excalibur, and then is she the one that was she interacting with Charles Martel in some way? And clearly she was interacting, according to Joan, with Joan of Arc. So Hecate is this figure that, at least through the tradition of this line of the stories of the sword, intervenes. And is she there to nudge, history along, or what? But here she is apparently connected to this sword in this way, and there may be some Hecate connection to the what the Templars knew, and the Templars.
That's a whole other show.
Yeah, they were pretty. I think they were connected to Joan of Arc. In fact, I suspect one or both of her brothers might have been Templars, because I think that's how they, because she said the last I knew of my, the special sword, my brothers had it. Well, we don't hear anything in the trial about them going after her brothers, which is interesting.
I do need to jump in here quickly. Okay. Otherwise, my mods will kill me. But you can go to gillstore.com and check out all kinds of great Into the Fringe merchandise. We have t-shirts that have the URL on the back. And we have, if I can find my cursor again, all different kinds of apparel and wonderful coffee cups, etc. So all you have to do is go to gillstore.com and you'll be able to be supportive of the channel and content like this. And I had one other question to wrap us up, Walter.
Yep.
Let's talk about your book. I Will See You in Time.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Can you give us a brief rundown on what that is about?
It was inspired by my Latitude 33 book research, plus the research for the first Empire of the Wheel book, and personal experiences. The novel was written, I Will See You in Time was written simultaneously as Rick Spence and I were writing the first Empire of the Wheel book. So,
really?
Yeah. So it leans heavily on the stuff in the first book. The second and third hadn't been researched or written yet. That's why the time travel novel really only reflects the first one. But essentially what I took was the research that I had done and was doing at the time there was a resonance between certain things. But I fashioned the story that has to do with, and this is the kind of thing we've seen in movies since then, where there's a secret organization that is a time, their personnel travel through time, and in this particular case, they use the carousels, special carousels, that are placed on certain spots and intersections of the telluric currents of the world grid. And the main character, he's brought into this. So he at one point he travels back to 1915 San Bernardino, when stuff from Empire of the Wheel is gearing up and happening, and he meets the actual people that are in that book, and then he ends up in, let's see, he ends up in San Diego in 1920 or something, in the 1920s, and then he ends up in San Francisco in 1906, right before the earthquake hits. And there he meets a woman who is identical to an ex-girlfriend of his who we meet in the beginning of the novel in the present timeline, okay? And what happens to him and her there in San Francisco in 1906 reveals to him why they had a connection to begin with, okay? So he learned, as he's going through the story, he's learning things about his own past lives, one of which may have been that he was Juan Cabrillo himself in a past life. It touches on that. Well, then it comes back to San Bernardino in 1915, and the things I suspected about what I was finding in San Bernardino in the nonfiction research, the things that I suspected that you just can't put in a nonfiction book, I used in the novel, okay? And he becomes attached to, if you've read Empire of the Wheel, you know who Cora Stanton is. Remember, when I wrote the time travel novel, I had no idea about the Etta Place role in this, so I didn't know who Cora Stanton really probably was. So in the novel, he has this attachment to Cora that ends up being platonic, and I won't ruin anymore because people want to read it. And I don't want.
In fact, I think that might be the giveaway book for this show.
Okay, that would be good. Now, I will say this. Those of you who have read the Empire of the Wheel books, if you read the time travel novel, you'll notice that the names Cora Stanton and Walter Shea and all of them have been changed. And that I had to do that after selling the rights to the producer who's really close to getting this as a TV show, the Empire of the Wheel.
Oh,
so
cool.
I had to go in and change the names because, it has nothing to do with what she's trying to do. So when you go in there and read the book, if you've read Empire of the Wheel, you're going to obviously know who these characters are.
Right.
So, just a heads up.
And speaking of characters, I'd like to bring in Canadian Spider-Man. Greetings.
Oh.
Why, hello. Thank you for doing this. That was fascinating listening to you both.
Yeah, we could go on for hours, but
Yeah.
we just don't. Neither Walter nor myself can stay up that late. Do you have the spinner wheel ready?
I just want to check one final time to make sure with Jill that everyone has entered. And when I get that word, yeah.
And that's the link right there. You can go to that URL to enter the giveaway. And we will wait for the word from Antiderivative Jill. So, Spidey, how have you been keeping?
I've been well, actually. Been very busy. Work has been going extremely well with things there, and we've been getting a bit of snow which is, it's kind of made the mountains pretty. And it's, the drive through in the mornings with the sun just coming up with the snow on the mountains has, been a highlight of it every morning. Yeah.
And on to your derivative, Jill says, you're on the wrong mic.
Yeah, I changed a couple of settings, and I put on echo cancellation.
And welcome Tessa D777, who says, great show, but I gotta go. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here, Tessa.
Yeah, it was captivating listening to you, Walter. Thank you very much.
It always
Sure,
is.
yeah, I love talking with Gil here and for you guys, It's interesting stuff.
And Cam's Crash Courses says, Timurin Genghis Khan, the first Gurkhan, also carried a sword fashioned from a meteorite. Supposedly this was why he couldn't be defeated in battle, so he was killed by assassination by a new wife.
See, I think this is a thing. This sword from the, in the ancient Celtic and English, parlance, it's the sword and the stone, and it's Arthur and everything. But yeah, I think this is a thing that went around.
And Spidey, this URL was just entered by Antiderivative Jill.
Great.
wheelofnames.com/U3P-5M2.
Got it right there.
All right. You just share your screen whenever it's ready, and we'll go ahead and roll
doing that.
And make sure to include sound.
Yes, I've clicked that already. Here we go. We'll click that, and
there it is.
Okay, perfect.
That was the wrong one. There we go. All right, Walter, can you count us down?
From what?
5.
Okay, ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's see who gets the time travel novel. Or is this the shirt?
No, it's the time travel.
Oh, hey.
Lord Ludicrous Plaid.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Fantastic.
That's great.
That is fantastic. Congratulations.
And Lord Ludicrous Plaid, if you want to send your information to me so that I can get it to Walter, you can do so at my email address here. But I imagine you know Walter well enough that you can discuss that with him personally.
Are we still doing the thing where you send me a bunch and I sign them, or?
I am going to send you a bunch, yes.
Okay.
I took them all out of the box in case I needed them for tonight.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Lord Ludicrous Plaid says, awesome, thank you so much. Don McDouglas says, congratulations. Congratulations from Cam. And Malia, of course. And Darius Munchausen. And Walter, I would like to thank you again for such a wonderful show. You're such a great guest and a fan favorite. We literally could go on for hours, but like I said, we don't have that kind of time. So we'll be looking forward to your next appearance on Into the Fringe.
So will I.
I've got March pretty well locked in, but I think I have 1 or 2 dates that we might be able to schedule you for, maybe sooner rather than later, actually. So
okay,
we'll have maybe a continuation of the show. Spidey, was there anything that you wanted to plug or talk to Walter about?
I just want to say thank you for the mini epiphany, really, about the sword and the stone, and and the connections with the multi-level connections with Hecate. So,
yeah, I'll tell you just in a sentence. When I went into the Empire of the Whale research, when it was early on, Hecate was this dark, occulty, gloomy, potentially evil figure that most people think she is. And by the time I was done, I have a completely different view and perspective of Hecate. She is not the let's just say the witches and the black magic folks don't own her.
Right.
There's so much more there, and so yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
I also wanted to point out that I'm wearing my new Call of Cthulhu T-shirt.
I almost wore my HPLHS movie production T-shirt. Gosh darn it!
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a great one.
This
that's
is really
poster
good.
art. That's on the cover of the DVD. I love it.
Yep. I got the DVD. It wouldn't play in my computer, but I'm moving from my current location to a place across town and using an old computer, so I'm sure it's fine.
Oh yeah, it'll be good.
It just didn't work. But
this
show did. Thanks very much again, Walter, for
Thank you.
Another just scintillatingly interesting show. And Canadian Spider-Man, thank you very much for spinning the wheel for us.
My pleasure.
And we will go ahead and wrap up. And please do subscribe to the Walter Bosley channel. And it's Cardinal Sin out.